Howdy, this is Jayesh from Incquet Solutions, and today we are going to see how we can integrate ChatGPT into Zoho Creator. Right. This is the final output which we'll be creating, a simple form which makes use of ChatGPT to generate ad creative based on the keywords which we are passing. All right. So, for example, this is how it is going to work. For example, consider you are trying to sell inventory management system or inventory warehouse control kind of system, and you want to generate an ad creative for that. So you can just pass the keyword as inventory warehouse. What it will do is it will generate a prompt for us, and it will pass that particular prompt to ChatGPT via the ChatGPT API, and it is making the ChatGPT API call, and then the GPT will return the response, and we are filling out a response in this particular field. And you can see the attention business owners are referring to all the proper ad creative prepared by ChatGPT. Okay, let's see how you can build this particular thing. So you need two crucial things to build this. One is how to set up this particular thing inside Zoho Creator, and another is how to prepare and make API call to ChatGPT. Right. So let's look into the first thing here. Here you can see the ad creative is a simple form. You can create a form just by clicking on plus button and create a form from here, and you can create this field directly drag and drop in this kind of field here. So we have used a single line here, multi-line here for the prompt, and a rich text for ChatGPT response, so that we can get more creative response directly in the as an HTML as well. Right. Now for the workflow, the major workflow which is used is user input. So whenever we are typing something into the keyword, it is triggering a workflow which is triggering the prompt workflow. So prompt also has some workflow on user input of the prompt, and after that it is calling it is invoking the ChatGPT API. Right. So let's look into these two workflow. The first one is directly simple. You can see you can directly create a new workflow by going to the workflow, clicking on the new workflow, and choose when it should run. It should run on both create and edit of the form, and we want to trigger it on user input of the field. All right, and we'll choose which particular field we are talking about. We'll choose keyword for triggering the keyword and auto filling the prompt. And in case of prompt, we will choose prompt, and we will give the name of invoke prompt or something, invoke ChatGPT or something like that. Right. So let's look into how it is being configured. So the keyword is being configured in this particular way. If you're looking at code, whenever a keyword is being typed, we are fulfilling the prompt by just giving a word like help me create an ad creative based on this particular keyword, and we are passing this particular keyword. So this is the full prompt we are generating and auto-filling the prompt. If the keyword is blank, then we will just keep the prompt as well blank. And now the other thing is, so what it will do is whenever we'll type something in the keyword, it will trigger the user input of the prompt, because it is providing a new value to the prompt actually, which will in turn trigger the user input of the prompt. So to handle that, we have already created this user input workflow for the prompt. We have given this the name of invoke GPT. And what this will do is it will actually call the ChatGPT API. All right. So the next step is to look into the code of how we can call ChatGPT API. Before that, so for that we have to go into the ChatGPT documentation somewhere here, and we can look into how the request is being configured. Right. Here you can see it is actually making a post call on this endpoint, and in the request you can see three things. This is the endpoint, this is the headers, and this is the data which is being passed. Right. And in the response, we can directly see the response which the ChatGPT is providing to us. So let's go through this API in detail. This is how it's being configured. So in the header, it is passing content type, which is standard application JS content type, and the main thing it is passing is the API key in the authorization key of the object. Right. So to get the API key, you have to go to platform.openai.com. You have to register an account there or log in via Google. Then go click on your profile and click on view API key. From there you can directly see all the API key which you are already having, or you can create a new API key from there. So just copy it and save it somewhere. We will be using this API key in our code. All right, so the next thing after this header is configuring the data, the payload which we will be sending. So in the payload you can see we have to pass only two main things. One is a model, which is ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo, which we will be using in our case. The latest one is ChatGPT 4, but we'll be using this one. And in the messages, you can pass a list of messages with the role of user and assistant and system. So in our case, it is going to be a single use kind of thing where we will directly push a prompt and we'll expect a reply for based on this particular prompt only. We are not trying to make a whole conversation. So here we can just follow this particular structure only, that in the list we just have to pass one single object. In the single object, the role will be user and the content will be our content, whatever we are trying to pass. So in our case, the content will be the prompt which we have made here, right? So to do that, what we'll do is let's see how we can make this happen inside Creator. So inside Creator, on user input of the prompt, first of all, what we'll do is we'll check if the prompt is filled or not, right? So let's do that. If a prompt is not null, or if the prompt is not blank, in that particular case we'll write the code to call the API. In the rest of the case, we'll just make the ChatGPT responses blank, right? The next thing which we need to do to make the API call is use this API endpoint. All right, so let's declare this endpoint as a ChatGPT API kind of endpoint. So we'll save this endpoint in a ChatGPT API variable. And after that, we'll prepare the header JSONs. The header, you can see that it is having these two these two keys, content type and authorization. So pass that content type and authorization. And in the authorization, you have to make the whole authorization in this structure as bearer and the API key. So just type bearer and paste here your own API key, which you have got from this particular step, right? And after that, the next thing which we need to do here is prepare the data which we need to send to the GPT, right? To do that, we will first of all create messages list in a messages variable. So this list will be a single list. Inside this, a single object is being passed, like we are doing here. So you can just copy paste this particular thing here. And so the role will be content, which is you, which you are telling to the GPT that you are a user, and the content which you're passing is the prompt which you have typed here, actually the prompt. So you can directly pass the prompt into the content of the message, and then we can carry forward that message to the main data payload which we have created here. So you can see this is able to match this particular format of model and messages which we are passing here, right? The next thing is making the API call. So in Creator, to make the API call, we use invoke URL, and here we have to pass the URL, the type of call it is, the parameter and header. So you can pass the ChatGPT API endpoint which we have stored in the URL. The type will be post because it has told us it is a post call, right? And in the parameter, you just have to pass the data payload which you have created by converting it into a string, right? And the header which we have created is the straightforward header JSON which you have created. You can just directly carry forward that into this particular API. Now the response it will give us will be a JSON which we can consider it as a map inside Zoho Creator. So the response will be stored in the response variable, and you can see the structure of the response. If it is a successful response, we will get an ID of the response, actually, right? And to see the actual content of the response which is provided by ChatGPT, you can see how the structure is being configured. So the structure in this way, inside the response, you're having choices list, which is a list of response provided by the assistant. In our case, it will be the first item which we are interested in. And so out of the list, the first object we are having, inside the object we are having messages, a message key, actually a message object, and inside the message object you can see there is a content. And this is a reply from the assistant, actually, which we are interested in. All right, so to get to that particular level, first of all we have to check if we have received an ID or not, because if it is we have not received an ID, then there is some kind of error happening from their side, and we can then get more detail about the error from the error object, actually. So let's configure that. First of all, what we'll do is we'll try to get the ID from the response. To get the ID, since it is a map, so to get something from the map in Creator, we have to use get and the key, actually. So we have to get ID from the map. What we'll do is response.get ID, and we will be able to receive that particular ID of the response. So if the ID is not null, in that particular case, it can be considered as a successful response. Now, to get the ChatGPT response from the response, we have to travel this particular path. That is choices, then the first item of the choices, then messages, then content of that message. Right. So that is what we are doing here. From the response, we are getting choices first, which is the key here, and choices is a list. So out of the list, we want the first item. So from the list, to get the first item, you use the same function get and pass the index. So index will be 0 for the first item. It will give us this particular object, right? So from this object we want message. So to get message, you can just type get message, and out of the message we want content, actually, because inside the message object you can see the content, which is the actual content of the ChatGPT response. So from the message you can type .get content, and in this particular hierarchical manner you will be able to reach to the actual content and pass it to the ChatGPT response, which you are able to see here, right? And in case of failure or error, what we'll get is we'll get error in the response, actually. So that is what we are trying to identify here. If the error key is available in the response, in that particular case there is an error, and we can show the error directly from here by getting the error object and then getting the message key from that particular object. So this is the straightforward code which you can configure on your user input of the prompt, and once you save it, you can directly try to use it directly by going into the ad creator. So we'll use the same thing. These are some keyword which I have copied. It is related to internet warehouse and inventory control and all kind of thing, right? On user input, it will trigger the workflow which is autofilling the prompt, and on user input of the prompt, it is triggering the user input of the prompt, which is making the API call, which we have written here, and the response is being captured and shown here, actually. All right, so in this way you can see this is in these few simple steps you will be able to configure the ChatGPT API on your Zoho Creator form, and it is totally on you how you want to use it. So right now on user input we are doing this. Using this, you can try to go through a particular description field and find analysis based on that field, and train GPT more on that kind of thing, and get a lot of thing done inside Creator using this particular thing. One of the example is IQ system which we have built, but this is how it can be done inside Zoho Creator. Hope you liked it. Thank you.